Welcome back to Her Secret Diaries, a place where untold stories finally find their voice. Where quiet hearts speak loudly, and hidden truths come out of the shadows. If you believe that every home holds a story and every silence hides a storm, then you are in the right place. Today, I want to share something that shook the very foundation of my life. The day my daughter-in-law replaced all my furniture, I still remember the smell first. Not a memory. A shock. A sharp, chemical scent that hit my nose the moment I opened the front door. It didn't smell like my home. My home always smelled like sandalwood and old books. Sometimes like cinnamon when I baked. But that day, it smelled like polish, glue, and something strangely unfamiliar. I stepped inside slowly, almost afraid to breathe at first. I thought I had walked into the wrong house. The walls looked brighter. The curtains were different. And then my eyes fell on the living room. Or what used to be my living room. My sofa was gone. The deep brown, slightly faded sofa that had held decades of laughter, tears, and late-night tea conversations. Gone. In its place stood a stiff, modern, cream-colored couch that looked like it belonged in a showroom, not in a life. The cushions were perfectly arranged, untouched by human comfort. For a moment, I couldn't move. I dropped my purse on the floor without realizing it. My heart began to pound as if I had caught someone stealing. But the thief had already left. Hello. I called out. My voice echoed in a way it never had before. Even the echo felt different. I walked further inside. The wooden coffee table my husband had built with his own hands. Gone. The little scratch near the corner where my son had crashed his toy truck when he was 5, erased. In its place was a glass table so shiny I could see my confusion staring back at me. I touched it. It felt cold. Nothing in that room felt warm anymore. Then I noticed the rug. The old Persian rug my mother had gifted me on my wedding day had vanished. Instead, a plain gray carpet lay flat on the floor, like it had no story to tell. I felt something inside my chest tighten. It wasn't just furniture, it was my history. I heard footsteps behind me, and turned. There she was. My daughter-in-law smiling, proud, like a child showing off a drawing. Surprise. She said cheerfully. "Do you like it?" Do I like it? The words echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry. Where is everything? Oh, she waved her hand casually. I had it all replaced. The house needed an upgrade. It looked so old. Double quotes. Old. The word struck harder than any insult I had ever heard. Old like the sofa that held my husband's last breath. Old like the rocking chair, where I used to sing lullabies to my son. Old like the dining table that witnessed birthdays, arguments, reconciliations, and silent prayers. Old like me. I forced a small smile. You replaced everything. Yes, she said brightly. New sofa, new tables, new curtains, new bed, even new wardrobes. I wanted a fresh start. A fresh start. But she never asked me if I wanted to end the old one. I walked into my bedroom, or at least, what used to be my bedroom. My heart sank. The carved wooden bed I had saved years to buy was gone. The floral bedspread my sister had stitched by hand, gone. The small bedside lamp with a cracked shade that still worked perfectly, gone. Instead, there was a sleek white bed with straight lines and emotionless perfection. Even the mirror was different. I looked at my reflection and for the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own life. She followed me inside. Isn't it beautiful? Now it looks like a modern home. Guests will be impressed. Guests with this house for guests now. Was I just another visitor? I sat on the edge of the new bed. It didn't creak. It didn't recognize me. It didn't hold my weight the way the old one had. Where are my things? I whispered. Oh, I sold most of them, she replied. Some were too damaged. Some were just outdated. Sold. My memories had a price tag. I felt a sudden wave of dizziness. Years of living, reduced to transactions. Did my son know? I asked, She hesitated for a second, then nodded. Of course. He said, whatever makes the house better. Whatever makes the house better. But what about what makes a heart better? That evening, my son came home. He walked in smiling, complimenting the new setup, praising his wife's taste. He didn't notice the way I sat quietly in the corner, like an extra piece of furniture she had forgotten to replace. "Mom, don't you think it looks great?" he asked. I looked at him. The boy who once clung to my sorry, who cried when I left him at school, who promised he would never let me feel alone, and I realized something painful. He had grown into someone who didn't understand the weight of memories. "I think," I said slowly, "it looks expensive." They laughed. IDID end, single quotes Days passed. I tried to adjust. I tried to convince myself that maybe this was normal. Maybe this was what progress looked like. Smooth surfaces and silent rooms. But every morning I woke up feeling like I was sleeping in a hotel. I started spending more time outside, sitting on the porch, watching the street, listening to the distant laughter of children playing. Because inside, there was no laughter anymore, only decoration. One afternoon, I decided to visit the storage market where old furniture was often resold. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. And then I saw it, my rocking chair, placed between two plastic stools, as if it were just another object waiting for a buyer. My hands trembled as I touched the worn armrest. I could almost hear my husband's voice, almost feel my son's tiny fingers gripping the sides. "How much?" I asked the shopkeeper. He named a price. It was less than what I used to spend on groceries in a week. I bought it without bargaining. When I brought it home, my daughter-in-law frowned. "Where are you going to put that? It ruins the aesthetic." Aesthetic. Another new word, in a house that had forgotten the language of love. "In my room," I replied quietly, and for the first time since the changes, I felt a small victory. I began slowly bringing back pieces of my past. A lamp here, a side table there, a faded cushion that still smelled like comfort. Each item felt like reclaiming a part of myself. My daughter-in-law grew irritated. My son grew silent, but I kept going. Because a home is not built with trends, it is built with time. One night my son finally confronted me. "Mom, why are you doing this? We are trying to move forward." I looked at him and said, "Moving forward doesn't mean erasing where you came from." He didn't reply, but I saw doubt in his eyes. Weeks later, something unexpected happened. Guests came over. They ignored the perfect sofa and gathered around my old rocking chair. They listened to my stories. They laughed at memories. They asked questions about the past. For the first time, my daughter-in-law looked uncertain. That night, she knocked on my door. I didn't realize those things meant so much. She said softly. I smiled. "Furniture can be replaced. Memories cannot." She sat beside me. For the first time, not as someone redesigning my life, but as someone trying to understand it. And slowly, our house began to change again. Not into the past, not into a showroom, but into a place where old stories and new dreams could live together. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes what looks like improvement can feel like loss. And sometimes, holding on is the bravest way to move forward. This is Her Secret Diaries, where every silent pain becomes a story, and every story becomes strength. The night after that conversation, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort you, but keeps asking questions. I lay on the new mattress, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling fan that hummed without rhythm. I missed the old one, the one that wobbled slightly and made a soft clicking sound, like it was whispering secrets of the years it had witnessed. I turned to my side, and saw my rocking chair in the corner. Even in the dim light, it looked alive. I got up slowly and sat in it. The familiar creak wrapped around me like an old shawl. For the first time since everything had changed, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. But belonging is fragile. The next morning, The tension returned. My daughter-in-law was in the kitchen, reorganizing the cabinets. I noticed she had replaced my steel containers with glass jars, each labeled in neat handwriting: flour, sugar, rice, lentils. Everything looked like a display in a cooking show. I opened one of the drawers and froze. My spice box was gone. The round, dented tin box that had traveled with me through 3 homes, countless festivals, and every meal I had ever cooked for my family, vanished. "Where is my masala box?" I asked. She didn't even turn around. I threw it away. It was rusting. I bought new spice racks. I felt something break inside me again. "That box was not just metal," I said quietly. "It was my mother's." She sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "Amy, you get too emotional about things. We need hygiene and organization." Hygiene. Organization. Words that sounded clean, but felt cruel. I didn't argue. Instead, I walked out of the house and sat on the porch again. The sun was harsh that day, but it felt kinder than the cold perfection inside. As I sat there, memories began to flood me. I remembered the day I first entered this house as a bride. There was no furniture then, just empty rooms and big dreams. My husband and I had bought everything slowly. One chair after months of saving, one cupboard after a good harvest season, one curtain after selling my jewelry. Every object had a story now. The stories had been replaced with matching colors. In the afternoon, my son came and sat beside me. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "Mom, are you unhappy?" I looked at him. Truly looked. There were new lines on his face. Worries I didn't know about. Responsibilities I hadn't noticed. Maybe he was also trying to build a life, just in a different way. "I am not unhappy," I said carefully. "I am displaced." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I replied, "I am living in my house, but I feel like a guest." He looked down at his hands. For the first time, he had no quick answer. Days turned into weeks. The house became a silent battlefield. Not of shouting or anger, but of small decisions. I would bring home an old photo frame. She would move it to a less visible shelf. I would spread a handmade tablecloth. She would replace it with a minimalist runner. We never fought directly, but we were constantly undoing each other. One evening, something unexpected happened. There was a power cut. The entire neighborhood went dark. At first, my daughter-in-law panicked. She couldn't find candles because she had replaced my old storage system. The rechargeable lamps weren't charged. The house that looked perfect in bright lights suddenly felt helpless. I knew exactly what to do. I went to my trunk, the only thing she hadn't touched yet, and took out an old oil lamp. I lit it and placed it in the center of the living room. Warm golden light filled the space. The modern sofa, a glass table, the gray carpet. Everything looked different in that glow. Softer, human. We all sat together on the floor. There was no television, no phones, no distractions, just us. I began telling stories. About my childhood. About my husband. About how my son once tried to cook tea and nearly burned the kitchen. My son laughed loudly. The way he used 2 years ago. My daughter-in-law listened quietly. Then she asked something that surprised me. What was this house like before I came? I took a deep breath and told her everything, not as an accusation, as a memory. When the lights returned, something had changed. Not the furniture, but the air. The next morning, I woke up to a strange sound, hammering. My heart raced. Was she changing something again? I walked out and saw my son fixing a wooden shelf on the wall. "What are you doing?" I asked. He smiled. "Making space for your old things." I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. My daughter-in-law came out with tea. She handed me a cup and said, "Maybe we can mix old and new." Maybe. That word felt like hope, but healing is never instant. There were still moments of misunderstanding. Days when she complained that my belongings made the house look crowded. Nights when I wondered if I should move out to give them freedom. Then one afternoon, a neighbor visited. She walked into the living room and said, "Your house feels so alive. Not like those magazine homes where you're afraid to sit." I saw my daughter-in-law's expression change. For the first time, she looked proud. Not of the design, but of the feeling. Slowly, she began asking me for advice. "What curtains did you use earlier? How did you arrange the kitchen? Can you teach me that sweet dish your son loves?" And I realized something important. She had never meant to erase me. She had just been trying to create her own place in a house that already had a strong history. One evening, she brought home something wrapped in newspaper. She handed it to me shyly. I opened it and gasped. "My old spice box. I found it at a scrap shop," she said. "We can clean it if you want." Tears filled my eyes. Not because of the box, but because of the effort. We cleaned it together. We arranged spices together. We cooked together. And the kitchen, once a place of silent tension, became the heart of the home again. Months later, our house looked very different. There was a modern sofa, but with my handmade cushions. There were glass jars, but also my old tin containers. There were new curtains, but tied back with the embroidered ribbons my sister had made. It wasn't perfect. It was personal sometimes. Guests still compliment the design. Sometimes they ask about the old rocking chair. Sometimes they sit and listen to my stories. And now, my daughter-in-law sits beside me, adding her own. I learned that day that change is not the enemy. Forgetting is. If you are listening to this and feeling like your space, your memories, or your voice is being replaced, don't stay silent. Speak gently. Hold on lovingly. Because homes are not meant to be showpieces. They are meant to be lived in. This is Her Secret Diaries, where hearts open slowly. And healing begins with a story. And my story is not over yet.